Good morning, students. Today we are going to see the fifth subtopic of Unit 2, that is nothing but history of international climate change negotiations, and introduces the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, United Nations Framework on Convention on Climate Change, IPCC. So, international climate change negotiations have evolved over decades, shaped by both scientific discovery and political will. United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and IPCC, International Climate Change, okay, are two fundamental bodies guiding the global climate agenda. Understanding the historical context reveals how science informed policy and how countries responded collectively. This lecture will explore easily scientific warnings, the creation of IPCC, the United Nations Framework Convention, what you call on climate change framework, and landmark agreements like Kyoto Protocol. Yearly scientific awareness. As early as 1970s, scientists began studying human influence on the climate system. Some projected warming of 1.2 to 2 degrees Celsius, while others expected cooling trends due to aerosols and observed temperature declines. This scientific uncertainty led to debates about the direction and magnitude of the climate change. The first World Climate Conference that occurred in 1979 acknowledged the human impact but avoided firm conclusion on warming versus cooling trends. Rise of concern in the 1980s. In the 1980s, observational data revealed a sudden rise in global air temperature. General circulation models advanced scientific forecasting accuracy. In 1985, Village Conference concluded that rising greenhouse gas concentration could cause unprecedented warming by 2030. So, in 1985, conference concluded that rising greenhouse gas concentration could cause unprecedented warming. Okay, underline the word in 1885 conference itself, it has been concluded. Okay, cause unprecedented warming by 2030. Scientists called for studies for negative impact and the formulation of preventive and mitigation strategies at the international level. From awareness to global concern, by the late 1980s, climate change became a recognized global environmental issue. So in 1980s, the people have a clear-cut idea, though this will affect our planet. Climate change became a recognized global environmental issue. It's not only for one country; it will be a global issue. The growing evidence lead to political pressure for coordinated responses. National governments began engaging with scientists to understand the implication for development, agriculture, and water resources. The stages were set for institutional framework to guide global action. Coming to the IPCC, in 1988, WMO and UNP, okay, United Nations Environmental Protection, jointly created the IPCC to assess the climate science comprehensively. What do you mean by IPCC? Any idea? So it's nothing but Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC. And what does it do? The IPCC was created to provide a policymakers with regular scientific assessment on climate change, which I told you in the last class. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Its mission to provide authoritative, policy relevant but not policy prescriptive assessment. The IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, evaluates the greenhouse gas emissions, environmental and socio-economic impact, and the realistic response strategies. Findings are shared globally to inform the scientists, governments, and the public. The importance of IPCC's works. IPCC synthesizes peer-reviewed research to create global consensus on climate science. Its assessments highlight the temperature trends, sea level rise, ice melt, and changing precipitation pattern. Its assessment highlight the change in temperature, sea level rise, ice melt, and changing precipitation pattern. That means rainfall pattern. Reports are crucial for linking the scientific evidence to policy action in negotiations. Okay, the credibility of IPCC lies in its transparent, inclusive process involved thousands of scientists from around the globe from around the world, that is from the globe. The first IPCC assessment report happened in 1990. The first report confirmed that human activities were increasing greenhouse gas concentrations. It projected significant warming in the coming century without mitigation. These findings influenced the negotiation of UNFC, United Nations Framework, okay, on climate change. Okay, in 1992, he stressed the need for yearly action even in the face of remaining scientific uncertainties. So, the creation of UNFCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, was adopted at the yearly summit in Rio. It set the objective to stabilize the greenhouse concentration to prevent dangerous interference with the climate system. The convention recognized common but differential responsibilities. It required developed nations to take the lead in reducing the emission and supporting developing nations. The United Nations Framework on Convention on Climate Change institutional structure is the supreme decision-making body of the UNFCCC. Subsidiary bodies like SPSTA and SPA support technical and implementation decisions. The Secretary in Bond coordinates the process. Regular COP, okay, the Conference of the Parties meetings review progress and negotiate new commitments. What is Kyoto Protocol? So the Kyoto Protocol was the first legally binding agreement under United Nations Framework Conference on Climate Convention on Climate Change, and Kyoto Protocol is one of the important protocol we need to know actually to what do you call it? It is an international agreement linked to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, committing industrialized countries to reduce the greenhouse gas emission. Kyoto Protocol has been comes out in order to reduce the objective of the Kyoto Protocol is to reduce the greenhouse gas emission. Underline the word. It was happened. It was opted in Kyoto, that is Japan, the city of capital, the capital of Japan. Okay, so it's a city, right? Japan, Tokyo is the capital and Kyoto is the city like Mumbai and Delhi, right? It was had opted in Kyoto, Japan in 1997 and its first commitment period ran from 2008 to 2012. The protocol's main features is legally binding targets for emission reduction for participating countries. The purpose is the Kyoto Protocol aims to combat climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions primarily from industrialized nations. Binding targets, it sets specific legally binding emission reduction targets for participating countries known as Annexion 1 parties, which include industrialized nations and countries with economics in transition. The first commitment period is 2008 to 2012 required participating countries to reduce their emission by an average of 5% below 1990s level. Second commitment period is 2013 to 2020 agreed to in Doha in 2012 extended the agreement. The flexibility mechanism. This protocol includes the mechanism like emission trading, joint implementation, and a clean development mechanism to provide flexibility for countries in meeting their targets. So the mechanism like CDM and G emissions trading were introduced to promote flexibility and cost effective reduction. So the Kyoto Protocol has been created in order to reduce the greenhouse gas emission. Okay, clean development mechanism allows developed countries to invest in emission reduction projects in developing nations. So clean development mechanism allows developed countries to invest in emission reduction projects. So in developing nations. So in order to safeguard the thing environment. So the ultimately the developing nations could not able to afford the thing. So the developed nations need to come forward and try to help them. The CDM, Clean Development Mechanism, developed countries allows developed countries to invest in emission reduction. Okay, it promotes sustainable development alongside emission cut. Examples include renewable energy project, energy efficiency measures, and methane capture. and CDM credits known as CERs can be used to meet Kyoto targets. Clean development mechanism known as CERs can be used to meet the Kyoto targets, that is to reduce the greenhouse gas emission. Joint implementation G, joint implementation and emission trading. Joint implementation enables developed countries to implement the projects in other developed nations or economics in transition. Emissions trading allows countries with surplus allowances to sell them to those exceeding target. This mechanism introduced carbon as a tradable commodity. They encourage cost-effective mitigation through market-based solutions. Limitation of the Kyoto Protocol. Major emitters like USA did not ratify the protocol. Very important point. Major emitters like USA did not ratify the protocol. Developing countries, including China and India, had no binding targets. So this is a some 10 years or 15 years reference material. Now no more India, China is a developing country. China is a developed country because of the technology they have. So you might have is giving a very high competition to US. Okay, if this growth is sustaining in China for the next a decade, China will be a superpower. Developing countries like India had no binding targets. The first commitment period had limited impact on global emissions. It highlights the challenge of securing broad precipitation in legally binding agreements. Towards a new global arrangement agreement, negotiation intensified in the 2000s to create a more inclusive framework. The 2007 Bali Action Plan launched discussion for a post-Kyoto regime. The focus shifted to mitigation, adaptation, technology transfer, and finance. New global agreement. The focus shifted to mitigation, try to reduce the thing, adaptation, adapt the technology transfer, and finance. The need for all major emitters to take action become increasingly clear. Copenhagen 15. Copenhagen agreement, new binding agreement. It is also to reduce the climate change. Copenhagen was expected to deliver a new binding agreement. It resulted in Copenhagen Accord recognizing the 2 degrees Celsius target. Countries made voluntary pledges for emission reduction. They overcome revealed deep dives between the developed and developing nations. So similarly, we need to know actually what is a Copenhagen Accord. So the Copenhagen is a place in what do you call it, Denmark, I think. Okay, so the Copenhagen Accord was a non-binding political agreement reached at the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Copenhagen in December 2009. It aimed to address the climate change by setting emission reduction target and outlining the financial support for developing nations. Key aspects include limiting global temperature rise to below 2 degrees a target Celsius, pledges for emission reduction by developing nations, and commitment for financial and technological support to developing countries. This video, okay, the video I will share to you later. Okay, hope you understood the key features. One is temperature target, another one is emission reduction pledges, financial and technology support, measurement, reporting and verification, and nationally appropriate mitigation actions. Temperature target. The accord aimed to limit the increase in global average temperature to below 2 degrees. So below 2 degrees is a very important point that need to be there in when you try to write about the Copenhagen COP15 in 2019. Okay, emission reduction pledges. Developed countries were expected to submit emission reduction plans for 2020 by January 31st. That's what they said. Financial technology support. The accord outlined mechanisms for providing financial resources and technology transfer to developing countries to support their climate action efforts. Measurement, reporting, and verification. The accord emphasized the importance of monitoring, reporting, and verifying emission reduction and financial support, particularly for developing nations. Okay, so the Durban platform. So, like Copenhagen, the COP17 in Durban launched negotiation for a new agreement applicable to all parties. The aim was to adapt it by 2015 for implementation from 2020. This marked a significant shift from the quieter system separation of obligations. It reflected growing recognition that climate change is a shared challenge. Under the word climate change is a not only a challenge for one country, it is a common challenge. Okay, so that need to be started out. The Paris Agreement, very important agreement, like quite a protocol. The Paris Agreement adapted to Coefficient 21. The Paris Agreement is a universal legally binding treaty. It aims to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius, pursuing the effect for 1.5 degrees Celsius. All countries submit nationally determined contributions. A global stock take every 5 years assess the collective progress. So now what do you mean by Paris Agreement? So we should know elaborately Paris about the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement is legally binding international treaty on climate change adopted in 2015 by 195 countries. Very important. One adopted by in 2015 by 195 countries. It aims to limit the global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius, preferably to 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels. This ambitious goal requires significant transformation in how countries operate, including reducing greenhouse gas emission and adapting the impact of climate change. So the goal of this treaty limit the global warming to well below 2 degree and pursue effort to limit to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Legally binding. So the agreement is legally binding, meaning countries have a commitment to act. 5 year cycle. So the countries are expected to update and enhance their NDCs. Okay, that is not nationally determined contributions every 5 years, increasing their ambition over time. Transparency and accountability is also I've discussed. The agreement includes the mechanism for monitoring, reporting, and verifying progress and promoting transparency and accountability among countries. The Paris Agreement is a crucial framework for international cooperation on climate change, but its success depends on strong, sustained action from all parties. As I told you, the climate change is not a problem for one country, it's a problem for the globe. Key features of the Paris Agreement: flexibility for countries to set their own NDCs. NDCs is nothing but actually, which I told you just now, nationally determined contributions. Emphasis on transparency, reporting, and accountability. Long-term goal of net zero emission in the second half of the century. Strong focus on adaptation, climate finance, and adaptability capacity building. The transparency framework, the enhanced transparency framework ensures all countries report on action and progress. Common reporting formats improve comparability. Technical expert reviews and peer discussions promote accuracy. Transparency builds trust and support informed negotiations. Climate finance commitment. So now the thing is that some undeveloped nation or developing nations, they have a technological issues in order to come out down the greenhouse gas emission from the industrialization. Okay, so they may look for the from the developed nation some funding. Okay, so developed countries committed to mobilizing $100 billion annually by 2020. Finance supports mitigation, adaptation, and capacity building in developing countries. The Green Climate Fund plays a central role in channeling resources. So the Green Climate Fund, from that they will help you to think. But at the same time, most of the industries are being put by the developed nation in their land, not in their land. I mean, they put it in the underdeveloped or developing nation because of the pollution also is one of the things. Okay. Ongoing discussion focus on scaling up finance beyond 2025. Technology development and transfer. The Paris Agreement strengthens the cooperation on technology research and deployment. The technology mechanism supports innovation and diffusion. Transfer of clean technologies helps developing nations leapfrog to low carbon pathways. This reduces cost and accelerates the global energy transition. Adaptation goals. Countries are encouraged to plan and implement the adaptation measures. National adaptation plans guide long term resilience building. Adaptation covers sectors like agriculture, water, health, and infrastructure. The Paris Agreement emphasizes adaptation priority with mitigation. The role of Copenhagen meeting post Paris. The Copenhagen sections review progress and update the implementation guidelines. They address unresolved issues like carbon markets under Article 6. The conference in Glasgow finalized the Paris Rulebook. Annual meetings maintain the political momentum and international cooperation. Article 6 Carbon Market Mechanism. What is Article 6? Article 6 enables voluntary cooperation between the countries achieved indices and market mechanism allow transfer of mitigation outcomes. Non-market approaches promote cooperation through capacity building and policy alignment. Rules aim to ensure environmental integrity and avoid double counting. Global stock take process occurs every year starting in 2023. Assess the collective progress towards long-term goals. Inform updates to indices. Okay, to increase ambitions. Nationally determined contributions. Indices means nationally determined contributions. To increase the ambition, inform update to indices to increase the ambition based on the best available science from the IPC, climate change, and other sources. Changes in implementation, gaps remain between current pledges and the 1.5 degrees Celsius pathway. Climate finance commitments are often unmet. Political will fluctuates with the domestic priorities. The pace of technological change, and policy alignments vary widely. The equity and climate justice. Developing countries stress historical responsibility of developed nations. So they just try to stress upon the importance of developed nation of contribution because they are the nations they because of industrialization they developed and now they are not coming forward to reduce the thing. So the developing nations what they said says historical responsibility of the developed nations during the meets. Okay, equity debates influence finance, technology, and mitigation obligations. Small island states and least developed countries seek stronger protection. Just transitions are critical to ensure the fairness in decarbonization. The role of non-state actors, business, cities, and civil society drive additional climate action. Voluntary commitments can complement national policies. Initiatives like RE100 and Race to Zero mobilize private sector leadership. Non-state actors influence political will and innovation. So the future pathways for negotiation, greater ambition is need to meet the 1.5 degrees Celsius target, strengthening development contribution, national development contribution indices, and enhancing the finance flows are priorities. Nationally determined contributions. International cooperation must address the adaptation and loss and damage. The role of science in guiding decision will remain central. So, the today's lecture, what you need to take away is that the climate change negotiations have evolved from scientific bombings to global treaties. The Paris Agreement provides a universal framework for action. The implementation and ambition will define success in the coming decades. Continuous dialogue, finance, and technology sharing are essential for sustainable future. So you need to come on a common ground and need to talk. That's why these all agreements comes into picture. So you have a Kyoto Protocol, Paris Agreement, Copenhagen Agreement, all talks about the climate change. Okay, which will come and sit in a common platform so that it also mutually helps the underdeveloped nation or developing nation from, and the in terms of technology transfer and so on and so forth. So today's lecture hope you are very clear about different types of agreement, what are the decisions they have taken, why they have made that agreement, what are the action plan need to be carried out by the countries and so on and so on. So with this note, I just try to conclude this section, today's section. If you have any doubt, just come and meet me during the face-to-face section on day 3 and day 4. Okay, that is especially on Wednesday and Thursday. If you have any doubt, please clarify your doubts then and there. Okay, in tomorrow's class, I think tomorrow we have a class. Definitely, we are going to just come and meet me. I mean, just come to the class so that we can discuss further elaborately if you have any doubt on the topic so far which has been covered. Okay, and moreover, your FAT exam has been scheduled on 25th and 26th. The syllabus for your FAT is 2 units. Okay, so almost I have another two subtopic only to complete. So hopefully you will start to read now itself so that you have another 10 more days. Okay, almost today is 14th early morning. So almost you have what you call another 10 days is there, and you have a long weekend on coming weekend. It's a long weekend. So make use of these opportunities and try to start to study. And moreover, the deadline has been given for you for submit your assignment. Okay, in the Google Classroom. Please try to look into that as well as a lot of videos with quiz enabled videos has been uploaded. Please try to watch that videos and try to answer the MCQs on time so that it will help you to get a good score in your fat one. Okay, because you have a internal assessment. Yeah, the internal assessment have a two part, that is what you call the assignment as well as MCQs, plus as usual you have a your fat exam. Okay, so with this note I conclude today's lecture. Hope you are getting benefited because of this lecture. Hope you understood a clear idea about what is Paris Agreement, Copenhagen Agreement, and so on and so forth. With this note, I stop it here. See you in next class. Thank you.